Fallen Empires has the unwelcome distinction of being the most hated set in Magic the Gathering's history, which is actually kind of unfair because in some ways, Fallen Empires was actually a victim of Magic the Gathering's success.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because we are here to talk about a set that has a special place in my heart, even if it is the most hated set in Magic the Gathering. And I truly do understand the hatred for the set. Now, before we dive into that, I just want to let you guys know that a new Magic the Gathering lore video has gone up over on my Fantasy Geographic channel. It's covering how Wrenn and 6 became Wrenn and 7. So I invite you to go on over and check it out. I'll leave a link to it on the screen at the end of the video. So, as I was saying, Fallen Empires is the most hated set in Magic the Gathering's history. Some of it is deserved, but literally a part of the hatred stems from the fact that Magic the Gathering was too successful. Now this may sound a bit confusing, so let me explain. Basically what happened was, up until the point of Fallen Empires, Magic the Gathering was very, very difficult to come by. Wizards of the Coast just could not produce enough of the stuff. Magic the Gathering was lightning in a bottle, and it essentially went like wildfire. Everybody wanted it, and you couldn't get it. Every store that tried to order it was only given a small portion of the amount they tried to order. So let's say a store ordered 10 booster boxes. They would only be able to get their hands on maybe one booster box. And this was a widespread issue. So when Fallen Empires came along, that was when Wizards of the Coast had actually figured out its production issue problems and was able to finally mass produce a set. So Fallen Empires had almost 400 million cards produced, which is a staggering amount of Magic cards. But what happened was all the distributors and game stores were used to there not being that much to go around and only getting a fraction of their order. So they would inflate the size of their orders for each set. So it's like, oh man, I will actually want 10 boxes. Why don't I order 100 boxes? And then when they go, you can only have 10% of what you want, I get the 10 boxes I want, right? So Fallen Empires comes along and they're like, yo, give me 100 boxes. And Wizards of the Coast says, no problem. Here's 100 boxes. So all of a sudden, retailers and distributors are like, uh-oh, I didn't want this much. We have way too much of this stuff. So they stopped ordering it from Wizards and created this massive backlog of Fallen Empires where Wizards of the Coast actually had to store tons of this stuff themselves. It cost them a bunch of money in that regard, and also ended up with a scenario where they couldn't produce as much of the revised set, which is crazy because revised was way, way more popular overall throughout the course of Magic's history. So to think that they stopped making revised cards to be able to make more Fallen Empires cards is pretty laughable. Fallen Empires became so easy to get, so like overblown in terms of the amount that was available, that stores were selling full booster boxes of Fallen Empires for $20, right? So that's one of the main reasons that people hated it, is it was everywhere and it was dirt cheap. Now that fact is compounded by the fact that this was an incredibly small set. So there's only a little over 100 different cards in the set. But on top of that, Wizards of the Coast tried a really cool experiment with Fallen Empires that ultimately fell flat, where they basically, when it comes to the commons in the set, they said, we're going to do 3 or 4 printings of each of these different commons with different artwork and different flavor text. And it did an amazing job in terms of world building, but it made it harder for people to instantly recognize cards. When you have a common that has 4 different variations, you're not even sure what you're looking at across the board. That was a problem that a number of people had. And to compound the problems even further, there were very few cards in the set that would be considered high value cards, right, to begin with. But then when you take into the account like the sheer amount of supply of it, there were very few cards that were powerful enough to have an impact on standard formats or anything like that, although standard wasn't really so much of a format back then. We had type 1 that showed up. But either way, the most of the cards in the set didn't have much of a gameplay impact. And so you have very few cards that are truly, truly desirable from a gameplay standpoint. And then you also have the fact that there's millions and millions and millions of copies of them, which drives their value into the dirt, makes them easy. Everybody's got them. Nobody's going to trade this stuff off you because everybody has Fallen Empires. Like, I literally knew a guy who just would go to people and be like, I'll trade all of the Fallen Empires you have that you're willing to trade off of you. And he would just get like bags worth of Fallen Empires. And he would just take them and burn them because he hated Fallen Empires that much. Like, people reviled Fallen Empires. I'm somebody who genuinely loves the flavor of the game and thought Fallen Empires was really cool. When I opened the packs, I was blown away. Fallen Empires was the first set to really bring in a tribal theme to a relatable level. Every set before then had all kinds of different creature types and felt kind of disparate. But the Sarpadian Empire, Fallen Empires concept really worked well to unify everything and give it a concrete feel of exploring a particular world. And I really appreciated that. The Isle of Sarpadia that was separated away from what was going on with the brothers and everything else in Magic, it was really their first attempt at going deep with storytelling. Everything up until this point either had no story or just the tiny little snippets on a few cards, but no real overarching kind of through line. Even Antiquities, which featured the Brothers' War, really didn't have that much in it. It had some quotes here or there, but overall, it didn't really have that much. Fallen Empires did an amazing job of world crafting and storytelling, but ultimately was a victim, mostly, I would say, of the print run issue. If Fallen Empires had been as scarce as Legends and the previous sets, I genuinely believe that people would like it a lot more. But in terms of expansions, it's the most hated expansion in Magic the Gathering history, and the most hated reprint expansion would be Chronicles, obviously, which we can talk about in another video if you're interested. But now, the next part of the video, we're actually going to go ahead and take a look at a Fallen Empires booster. So let's dive in. All right, so before we open the booster pack, I just want to point out some of the differences in old school boosters compared to the newer boosters. So you'll notice that it has these white edgings and isn't done in a foil styling. And there was actually a problem where you can figure out what's inside of a booster pack by maneuvering the cards along these white areas and holding them up to the light. So that is interesting and of note. Another noteworthy aspect is the fact that the booster packs used to have little story blurbs on them. So it's right here on the pack. You're not going to be able to make it out on the screen most likely. So I'll read it for you here. It says, in the southern oceans of Dominia Prime, and if you didn't know, Dominia Prime is Dominaria. It's also known as Dominia Prime. So, in the southern oceans of Dominia Prime lay a continent of great kingdoms. Far from the war between Urza and Mishra, the lands of Sarpadia prospered. But as the climates changed, resources dwindled and empires crumbled. Hideous new species arose in the forest and the seas, forcing the Sarpadians to fight for their very survival. Recruit these toughened warriors and vicious beasts for your duels, but beware lest you fare no better than the Fallen Empires. I like that there used to be this extra emphasis on flavor on every booster pack, because Fallen Empires was an incredibly flavorful set, and this was actually the first set that I really got to get my fill of. When it came to Legends, you weren't really able to get that many cards from that set, that many boosters, but Fallen Empires did not have the same supply issues. So let's see, what are we starting out with? We've got a Homarid Shaman. So Homarid Shaman is 2 blue and 2 for a summon Homarid. I love the old school like wording for creatures. Now they all say creature dash the creature type. But back in the day, all creatures were considered summons, which added an extra level of delightfulness in terms of flavor for me. I understand they changed it for mechanical reasons, but I definitely dig the way it used to be. So this guy is 4 mana for a 2/1, pay 1 blue, tap target green creature. So you can just spend blue mana to tap down green creatures. Color hosers were stronger back in the day. Admittedly, 4 mana for a 2/1 isn't so hot, but these not too shabby in terms of the concept of them, right? So the flavor text says, the ground grew swampy. Hooves and claws sank into the marshy earth. Snarls of rage and bleats of despair echoed through the trees as the waters grew higher and higher. And that's Kaliki of Havenwood, who is basically writing down remembrances. This is called Havenwood Remembered. And the artwork shows this crazy Homerid shaman, like, standing up atop the waves. You got a little crab down here in the corner. I always loved that. But the Homerid shaman has this staff, and it's raised towards the moon. These are tidal worshipping, like, sea beasts. I absolutely love it. The Homerids, admittedly, were one of the jankiest tribes in Fallen Empires. They were pretty weak overall, but the Homerid Shaman is one of the stronger ones from that set, and I believe this guy is one of the 2 uncommons. These are 8-card packs, actually, which I didn't mention earlier, and they are comprised of 6 commons and 2 uncommons, but in more recent days, people have started to consider particular uncommon variations rare variations. It's weird how the old booster packs worked. So, Homerid Shaman is our first card. Then we've got Raiding Party, otherwise known as Orcish Thong Get Together, right? This is the artwork. It's like, okay, man, they're putting Wrath of God to shame. So, 1 red and 2 for an enchantment that says Raiding Party may not be the target of white spells or effects. So it's interesting that it just has that side effect of, yeah, you know what, if you're playing white, you can't really interact with this card. 0, sacrifice an orc to destroy all planes. A player may tap a white creature to prevent up to 2 planes from being destroyed. Any number of creatures may be tapped in this manner. Now, by today's standards, this absolutely is bonkers, right? If you look at this, just sacrifice an orc to destroy all planes. I mean, you can make shapeshifter tokens, little changeling tokens, or whatever to easily meet those conditions, but it becomes pretty obvious that this can be activated multiple times in a turn. So if you had out multiple orcs, you sacrifice the first orc, all planes are going to be destroyed. Then they start tapping down their creatures to save their lands, and then by the time you go to sacrifice the second orc, all the planes are gone. Like, they're done, right? You're just like, okay, they've tapped their creatures. They're not going to be able to save their lands. All you would need is basically 3 regular everyday orcs, and you'd be guaranteed of wiping out all your opponent's lands. Now, by today's standards, we know land destruction is incredibly powerful. This is not the type of card they would print nowadays. Like I said with the Homerid Shaman, the color hosers were super strong, and I will admit that the power of this card was never evident to me until today. This is absolutely insane. You know what I mean? Sure, it's limited to a tribe that isn't very well used, but the fact that you can just, if somebody's playing white, you can just smoke all their lands over and over, because this stays out, right? Once you get rid of their lands, and like, if you can handle their creatures, they're not going to be able to put out more creatures, and every once in a while you can just sack an orc to completely Armageddon one side of the board. Absolutely insane. And the artwork is nutty too. You got these orcs all leaping in. I don't think that I agree so much with the backside aspect of this artwork, but what are you going to do? So, that's the other uncommon from the pack. The rest of the cards will be common. Oh, Mindstab Thrall. Dude, I used to actually play this guy. He's great. 2 black and 1, or at least he was great. 2 black and 1 for a 2/2 Thrall. And if Mindstab Thrall attacks and is not blocked, you may sacrifice it to force the player it attacked to discard 3 cards. If you do, it deals no damage during combat this turn. If that player does not have enough cards, his or her entire hand is discarded. I love the way that the old school cards explain out the entirety of the rules to you. Like, you have to discard 3 cards. What if I don't have 3 cards? Then just discard what you have. Oh, I thought maybe if I didn't have 3 cards, I just wouldn't have to discard anything. It's like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Now, admittedly, as I mentioned earlier in the video, Fallen Empires, when it came to the commons, it gave them all multiple variations of the artwork. And I'm glad that it did, because ultimately, I didn't really like this one. I like things that feel more magical, and the idea of this guy just kind of running up with like a Looney Tunes explosive, just like, yay, look at me, I'm gonna get you, you know what I mean? Like, how does that affect your brain? Does he literally do physical brain damage to the Planeswalker with this, but at the same time deals no damage? So the artwork, in one way, is comical, because you've got this Thrall with his goofy long legs or whatever just running along, and it shows the sacrificial nature of the thralls as well. But ultimately, it just kind of falls apart as a concept for me, and I appreciate other artworks of the thralls more. But that is down to personal taste. So if that's something you enjoy, this artwork is goofy and silly, so there is an element of fun to it. Next up, we've got an Orcish Spy. This is a silly card. 1 red for a 1/1 orc. So remember what I said about that enchantment. Look at how cheap orcs are to put out. 1 mana to cast, and you can sack this to destroy all your opponent's planes with that other enchantment. That's crazy. So 1 red, 1/1. Look at the tap, and I guess I should mention as well in case I didn't. This is the last set in Magic's history to use this as the tap symbol. The T rotated on an angle like this, as opposed to the arrow that we all know and love. So, tap, look at the top 3 cards of target player's library, and return them in the same order. So this is clearly better than the goblinized versions we saw. Orcish Spies are more effective. Goblin ones tend to give away information to your opponent, but in this case, this guy is actually pretty solid. 1 mana to put out, 1/1, and you get to look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Sure, you don't get to change them around, and, I mean, you could theoretically do it to your own deck too, right? Because it says target player's library. So overall, not too shabby. The flavor text says, yeah, they're ugly, they desert in droves, and their personal habits are enough to make you sick. But I'll say this for orcs, they make great spies. And that is a quote from Erva Djursdottir. And I'm actually not really familiar with that character from the history of the Sarpadian empires. But you can see this set does a great job of delivering a lot of flavor. Big blocks of flavor text. It's really enjoyable. Then we've got Vidalian Mage. I remember when I thought this card was so OP. 1 blue and 2 for a 1/1 merfolk. 1 blue and tap it. Counter target spell if caster of target spell does not pay an additional 1 mana. Play this ability. I'm having a hard time. Play this ability as an interrupt. The flavor text says, come back, cowards! Everyone knows merfolk can't wield magic. And that's Pashadar Durf, Goblin Flotilla Commander. Last words. That's pretty funny. The Goblin Flotilla is another card in this set. It's goblins who are seafaring, but they also get seasick, so it's kind of silly. The artwork on this is amazing. You've got this big, beefy Vidalian Mage with the crazy, like, spikes waving off of his head, and it's got, like a little tiny merfolk fairy kind of thing. Is this what it, like, you go to cast a spell and it focuses its magic into this crazy little fairy being that flies up into your face and hassles you to mess with your spell, so you have to spend some of your mana to dispel it? And this, again, like, these commons all have different variant artwork. I remember thinking the Vidalian Mage was so powerful because its effect was repeatable. You could just be like, bro, I can counter spells with this every turn. My friends hated Vidalian Mages. I mean, it's understandable. It's really annoying. All right, what's next? Then we've got Combat Medic. Oh, how the times have changed. This is another card that I thought was really good. 1 white and 2. I was such a noob. 1 white and 2 for a 0/2. It is a soldier. Nowadays, this would clearly be a soldier cleric or just a cleric, human cleric, right? So 1 white and 1, prevent 1 damage to any player or creature. It's like, whoa, it doesn't tap to do that like the Samite healer does. Bro, you can use this infinitely at a very bad rate. But I used it in the beginning. It worked. The flavor text says, without combat medics, Acacia would probably not have withstood the forces of chaos as long as it did. I like the fact that the flavor text for all of these different cards comes together to weave a great story. The artwork is pretty straightforward. You've got, like, this world symbols for the medic on the box and on the beast to let him know, like, in case somehow there's some kind of treaty where you've agreed to not attack each other's medics. I don't know. But look at the beast he's running on. How is this guy a 0/2? Look at this. You know what I mean? I guess it's because he's agreed not to engage in combat. But good lord, it looks like a 3/3, right? That's pretty intense artwork for a 0/2. After that, we've got Tidal Flats. 1 blue for an enchantment that says 2 blue. All your creatures that are blocking any non-flying creatures gain first strike until end of turn. The attacking player may pay 1 for each attacking creature to prevent Tidal Flats from giving that creature's blockers first strike. So this is a weird enchantment, right? It's used by a blue player to give your blocking creatures that don't have flying first strike. What a bizarre card from a color pie perspective, right? Blue caring about blockers to give them first strike, that feels very much like a white ability. Although I do get the flavor they're going with. Basically, you've got these tidal flats, but if you spend blue mana, you're pumping water essentially into the flats, and so they become marshy and muddy, and it's harder for your opponent's creatures to maneuver through, so they have first strike, but then the other planeswalker can spend some mana to kind of dry it back up in certain areas, so the first strike isn't applicable. The flavor is definitely there. And then we've got Farrell's Zealot. 2 white and 1 for a 2/2 townsfolk. If Feral Zealot attacks and is not blocked, you may choose to have it deal 3 damage to target creature. If you do so, it deals no damage to an opponent this turn. I remember when I first read this card, I thought to myself, why wouldn't they just block it? Why would they let me do 3 damage to one of their creatures? I never actually thought about using this just when my opponent didn't have untapped creatures to be able to destroy their creatures. It's funny how like everything seems so evident now after decades of experience with Magic and card evaluation. But back then when I started, like I got these cards when I had been playing Magic for less than a month. I didn't know very much. Certain things just weren't evident. What is evident is how intense this dude is. The flavor text says, after the fall of Trocaire, Farrell and his followers formally broke their ties with the rest of Acacia. They basically went like full crazy religious order. But look at this guy. Look at how many blades he's carrying. He's got 2 daggers in his hand, and he's covered in all these bandoliers full of just endless amounts of blades. You see how he's able to do 3 damage to any target. That is very evident. So, my friends, I hope you have enjoyed this walk down Magic's history, talking about old school Fallen Empires action. As I mentioned earlier in the video, brand new lore video up on Fantasy Geographic, talking about how the Planeswalker Renin 6 has become Renin 7, so go ahead and check that out. I want to thank all my patrons for supporting my channel, and I will see you all, my friends, for the next video.